Ray Garvin is the founder and creator of Destination Devy and host of the popular show Wake Up with Ray G. He's a former college football defensive back, he's got a law degree, and he's the first to say good morning to all the good people out there. These are his late round perspectives. But I think this is the first actual show that we've sat down and just talked ball together.
I think so, because I'm just used to hearing this, the 101 of voices on the podcast airwaves from my car speaker. I've not heard it through my mic headphones. So you're right. This is our first time, man.
Yeah, no, I'm pumped. I'm super, super pumped. You have more of like I feel like you have a very unique background, just in general, when you compare it to the nerdiness of me and others in the space. You come from, you played defensive back in college. Mm-hmm. You have sort of like you look at both the qualitative and quantitative side of the game more than I do, for sure. More than a lot of people, because I think in general the fantasy community skews towards numbers a little bit more than being good enough to be able to watch stuff, right? Because not a lot of people have the same background that you would have. So my question to you, what I want to kick things off with. You do a lot of work with college football in particular. I do college football prospecting and stuff, but I don't really get going until January, if I'm being honest. I'm a Pitt fan, alma mater, all that good stuff. Kind of sucks this year. It's been pretty bad, pretty bad since Pickett left. But I'm more of a casual, college football viewer in season. And then once January hits, that's when I really get going with my prospect models and like really dig into these guys. I'm still watching them because I think it's important to be competent knowing what these guys look like. But you, man, you're doing NFL stuff, college football stuff. You're doing everything. So I'm curious, like, what your typical weekend's like, during the season and in the fall. And are you skewing more towards college football? Or are you skewing more towards NFL? Like, what's that look like for you?
Yeah, JJ, it's I'm still trying to refine that as I go. One of the things that I've always said when I started Destination Devy was the more you know about upcoming prospects, upcoming draft classes, just from a general standpoint, the better prepared you can make your dynasty rosters, right? You just kind of understand, like, should be a good class. This is a strong tight end class or a strong wide receiver class. Weekends are tough, man. I'm a father first and foremost, right. And I'm very proud and happy about that. And I've got two young boys who are very involved in athletics right now. So, Saturday mornings are a little tough. But yeah, man, I'm diving into college every single Saturday. I truly believe that how we play fantasy football today, like the changes that we're seeing in the NFL, they start in college, yeah. JJ. These spread attacks, these using these creative space makers and the Tank Dells and, these type of receivers, it starts in college. And you're seeing so many NFL teams start to implement different offensive strategies and schemes taken from the CFL. Anybody watching the Miami Dolphins right now, the orbit motion, getting players moving before the snap, that's CFL principles. They're doing this in the Canadian Football League, and you're watching these innovative offensive coordinators and play callers pull things from college, the RPO game, the run pass option, zone reads, orbit motions, pull those, and they're implementing these in the league. And we sit back on Sundays like, oh my God, did you see that play that Mike McDaniel called? And I'm like, hell yeah, Kansas runs it 5 times a game. Right. Just watch Kansas. They're doing it. So my biggest thing that I feel the fantasy space is missing is I've learned so much from the data nerds that I've changed my process. I'm a lot more data-driven than film, but I think real football and fantasy football, they collide at these intersections of BMI, size, speed, all these other things. And I think that's where the biggest edge is right now, is understanding really and truly what's happening from a real NFL standpoint, whether that's no more bell cows, the death of the bell cow running back, or the emergence of the Tank Dells and the smaller separation specialists. I truly love the game of football, JJ. Before fantasy, above any of that stuff, I truly love football, dude. I vividly remember, man, I had to have been about 7 or 8 years old, 7 or 8, when I asked my mom for a weight bench for Christmas because I wanted to get bigger and stronger for football. Like, I love the game. So trying to find creative ways to pair and marry the things that I've learned from the fantasy community and some of the insight that I've gained from people that I know that have played professional football, my experience in playing the game of football and being around players who were very successful in the NFL. It just gives me a different outlook, a little more patience, and just some more context as to why things are happening, or conviction bets on players who may look like an outlier from a data standpoint, but following the game and the trends, you could see this stuff coming.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to say arrogance because it's probably too strong of a word, but there's a lot of that when it comes to either side of the spectrum when we're analyzing this stuff. Whether you're purely a film dude who's maybe not even that into fantasy football, but that's just what you do, and you sit there and you totally ignore data, I think that's wrong. And if you're someone like me who's better at looking at data and analyzing trends, I still understand football, of course, but at analyzing that stuff, you have to humble yourself to know that other people might be better than you at certain things. You're bringing what you're good at to the table, right? And I think that's where my process has changed a lot with prospecting, especially over the last few years, is it's really easy from a data perspective to get really locked into certain processes. We've seen it, maybe not as much over the last year because I think Chris Olave burned a lot of people, but you see it with like the early declare stuff. And not only that, but like NIL is definitely changing stuff. That's definitely changing things. But, you see it with the early declare stuff and people just fading wide receivers simply because they went to school an extra year. But there's so much more to these guys than that. I think you brought up a really good example of the smaller wide receivers, and I've been guilty of it, right? Like I look at my model and I publish my prospect guide and I'm like, why does my model like Wan'Dale Robinson so much? Why does it like Tutu Atwell so much? And then I subjectively, push those guys down. And then eventually, Wan'Dale has a great targets per route run rate. He's looking like he could be something, hopefully, eventually. And then Tutu's doing what he's doing this year. It maybe took him a little bit of time. But I do think that the open-mindedness is just really, really key here. And you mentioned that with you sort of coming from that football background, having that background, understanding the importance of data in this game, because this is a game about numbers at the end of the day, right? But it's really cool to just see kind of that transformation and stuff. So you think, like, what do you think the biggest thing from playing college ball has helped you with when it comes to fantasy football? Because that transition, I mean, it's such a interesting transition. We see a lot of, no shade to like some people that are on TV and stuff like that, but we see a lot of like players who played, but they're clearly not putting in the work to truly analyze the game, and they just say things on TV and stuff like that. Clearly not putting you in that bucket, but there is a weird transition from going from player to analyst. What do you think has helped you and maybe even hurt you at times too?
You said it a few minutes ago, being humble, being open-minded to different approaches. I think a lot of the people that we watch on TV, no offense to any of them, but they played football at the highest level, JJ, at the highest level. So there comes a natural level of arrogance. Like, I played in the NFL. I know. I've been in the meeting rooms. Like, what can JJ Zacharyson tell me? I played in the league. But I do think there's a lot that the NFL community could learn from the fantasy space, from the fantasy nerds, from the data. Because there is a lot of things where you look at it and you're like, this makes a lot of sense. It's hard to dispute this.
Yeah.
I think for me, I played Division II college football. I got to play one season at the 1AA level. They call it FCS now. Mm-hmm. But for me, the biggest thing that I learned is that player progression is not an elevator up. It just doesn't, you don't get drafted and things just go like this or things just go down. It's not a linear progression that every year you either get better or worse. Sometimes for various reasons, it takes players, a Tutu Atwell, a Mike, whomever it is, some time to navigate and find their way through a new game, a new environment. These are young kids coming out of college, 19, 20 years old. And I know it's hard to go back, at least for me, I'm 37 years old. So to go back in the mind frame of an 18, 19-year-old, but it truly shows me in playing the game and watching a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson just dominate year one. Those are different level of prospect. Those, we always talk about the outlier, but those are the outliers. Yeah. Like Jamar Chase is the outlier. Justin Jefferson and those are the outliers. It is not the trend. It's not the norm. Even Jalen Hurts took some time, JJ, and I'm not here to brag and boast, but watching Jalen Hurts in college and some of the context around what happened to him during his time at Alabama and then his transition to Oklahoma, from the time he was drafted, I was like, if this kid could just hang on long enough, if he gets some opportunity, I bet you he'll capitalize. And it took him 3 years to develop into Jalen Hurts, but it happened. And a lot of times in fantasy, if things don't happen, week 1, Jahmyr Gibbs, week 2, Jahmyr Gibbs, people are like, it's done. It's over. They're cooked. No good. Trade them, drop them. Wasted asset. They're a bust. But that's not true. That's not how football works. Right. Some players take a little more time to develop. Some, they hit the ground running. And those are the truly elite assets. So for me, it's given me a level of patience with some players. Now, I do have a threshold. I ain't going to be patient forever because we don't have all that time to waste in this game or the proxy of a game that we play. But it's given me a little more level-headed approach when things aren't going so well for a player early on, because it just doesn't have, that's not how football is. It's just not.
Yeah, and sometimes it's coaching too, right? Like sometimes it's just things that we can't really control. We can say this guy's really good, and, you know, usually talent wins out. You know, usually coaches know what they're doing, but sometimes coaches don't always know what they're doing. There's still a non-zero chance that Detroit completely screwed up what went on with DeAndre Swift. I mean, that's still, there's a chance that they just didn't use him properly. They didn't mesh with him. He's doing what he's doing in Philly. You know, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be fine. And we're recording this for the record. This is going to go out on a Friday. We're recording this before, hopefully, fingers crossed, Jahmyr Gibbs goes off, you know, against the Packers. But I do want to throw that caveat out there. But I do think that, you know, there's just so many different angles to kind of come from as to why players are and aren't doing things. We can look at trends, and that's why I always say this is a more probability-driven thing as opposed to a factual thing. You know, the way that Quentin Johnston has gotten off to his start. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit concerning. It doesn't mean that he's toast. It's just we would rather him not get off to the start that he's gotten off to. We would rather him be on the field more, seeing more routes. One of those players, Ray, who didn't really get off to a hot start, whether it was injury or not, was Kyren Williams, right? He comes out, he gets hurt. I think it was on special teams, right? His first week. There were some rumblings that he was going to get more work. It was basically a report that came out like hours before that first game, if I remember correctly, where they were saying that Kyren Williams might see more work in this Rams offense than we all anticipated. And we're like, well, that was from left field because, you know, he basically went from someone that a lot of people, I think you were in on Kyren, entering the league. Yeah, I liked him. And then he got knocked in my model because he tested like me at the combine, right? You know, I'm sorry. I'm not running a 4.7 even. I'm probably running a 5.7, but regardless, you know, the dude goes to the combine. He tests pretty poorly. It's not everything. It's just part of the equation, right? Then he goes, year 1 didn't really show that much, but then year 2, we're seeing, right. It's year 2 for him right now, right? I'm not being crazy.
Yeah. Year 2. Yeah. Yep. It's year 2.
I was kind of having a brain fart there. But Kyren Williams now this season not only starts splitting that backfield with Cam Akers, now Cam Akers is gone, and over the last 2 weeks, Kyren Williams has seen every single running back rush in the Rams backfield. There's only been 5 of those games all season long. He has 2 of those games across the league. So I want to ask you, as someone who was into Kyren entering the league, do you have any concern about him being this bell cow for the Rams? Do you think that he is because there is concern out there for sure from a lot of people still, even after seeing the volume. Is there concern on your end that he's not going to be able to maintain this? And then as a result, do you think that he's sort of a sell in fantasy, or do you think that he's still a buy?
Absolutely, I'm concerned. Absolutely, JJ. Not just the fact that he's playing every snap out of the backfield, is the fact that he's on special teams still. Right. He's like, I know that seems like something very minute and minor, but the fact that he's still on special teams, I'm seeing him on punt return, kick return. I think I saw him on a coverage unit. Don't quote me on this, but I think that is concerning for me. You don't utilize your starting running back like that. But here's the thing. Rams didn't invest anything in Kyren Williams. Nothing. Right. They've got no monetary, financial money tied up in that player. They'll continue to ride him and use him as long as he's healthy. As long as he's healthy and as long as he can get on the field and tote the rock, I'm sure they will continue to use him. He is somebody that I would 100% try to sell. I understand the opportunity and the usage. I love it. But this is a guy that the moment, and JJ, you've been in this game long enough to see the different trends and sort of reactions in the space. I haven't seen fantasy football this reactionary ever since I've been playing. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a day-to-day thing, hour by hour
100%.
almost,
Yeah.
player value, right? It is very, very reactionary. If Kyren Williams went out there and knock on wood, we don't ever wish for injuries, but tweaked an ankle, he suffered a high ankle sprain, was going to miss multiple weeks, his value would tank. That wouldn't be the same for a Bijan Robinson or a Christian McCaffrey, but for Kyren, it would be next man up. So while I am encouraged and thankful for the production and the usage that he's giving us right now, heck yeah, I'm concerned. And do I believe it will continue? It will until it won't, because he plays running back and they will get hurt. And at that point in time, I think his value is going to take a massive hit.
Yeah, it's a really, really weird situation for me, at least, in the way that I'm analyzing it, because, obviously he's seeing all this work. So when he's seeing work, he's going to be usable to some degree in fantasy football, right? My issue is, number one, what you're saying, health for sure, right? And not only that, but like I don't know if he's like built for it. This isn't like a Saquon. Obviously Saquon hasn't been able to stay healthy, but just like that kind of build, right? It's just that's not the running back that we're talking about here. So that's one thing. The other thing is I look at their depth chart, and I don't know where you were at with Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans coming out, right? But I personally, like I was looking at my prospect model earlier today, both of those guys look worse in the model than Kyren Williams did, right? And so I'm sitting here and I'm saying, if they had, I look at like Minnesota right now. It's really, really easy to say Alexander Mattison better be looking over his shoulder because now they have Cam Akers, and I think Ty Chandler's an explosive back, and he's at least intriguing, right? And so it's easier for me to say, yeah, like throw some darts at a Chandler or an Akers, because Alexander Mattison hasn't been performing that well, right? He's seeing volume, but the talent might not be there. He might just be a jag. And so that, from that perspective, it's really easy to then say, okay, you don't have to buy into Alexander Mattison. You can sell him off, or you can trade him away, whatever, try to trade based on this volume. With Kyren Williams, I hate the backups too. Like the backups just aren't doing it for me. And it's not like free agency that there's just these guys sitting there ready to step in. I know like Leonard Fournette's still out there and stuff, but I'm not excited about any sort of competition, and that's the thing that's really keeping me attached to Kyren in some way, because I see of course I see the downside, but I also just don't trust Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans. Are you in the same boat? Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, and that is the dichotomy here. Is I have zero interest in either of the two backup running backs.
Right.
I don't think. And why on earth would the Rams pay Leonard Fournette $2 million or whatever for what? Like I have little confidence that any other running back is going to step in that room and pull away from Kyren Williams this year, absent an injury. And that is the point right there, JJ. What do? You ride the production, or if you do sell, are you selling for something that is giving you more upside, more safety, security long term? I don't know. That is my concern with Kyren, yet the other side of the fence is those other two are zero threat to Kyren Williams. As long as he's healthy, they are zero threat. But JJ, we look at this offense, the O-line is a mess.
Yeah,
the fact that he's producing behind the only thing keeping us in on Kyren is the opportunity and the usage.
Yeah.
That is really it. So for me, that is where that interesting dichotomy sort of comes into play.
Yeah, and look, thing that I've learned through the years is that you do not want to just buy into situation. You do not want to just buy into volume. You don't want to buy into this dude seeing all these running back rushes. It's obviously part of the equation because you want to know what that looks like. But from my perspective, especially in if we're talking dynasty here, he's much easier sell. Redraft, I understand if you just kind of you got him off the waiver wire. You're just kind of riding it out, whatever, because the backups aren't anything special either. But I think you're right. Like we have to be cognizant that he produced, he's had some decent games, but there's a chance, probably a decent chance, that there's struggles ahead just because that offense and the way that it's built. On the flip side is an offense that's thriving, crushing, unbelievable situation. and you got Devon Achane, who I've been calling A-Chain, all offseason.
Is it A-Chan or is it Chain or what is it, AJ? What is it? I'm about to call you AJ because I'm thinking about A-Chain. What is his name, JJ? So, what is the last name?
Well, the other thing too, man, is that I had him as without the apostrophe like throughout, because in college he didn't go. It's like they just didn't care about like asking players what I don't know what it's like when you were in school and stuff, but they just didn't even remotely ask players how to say their first name, how to even spell their first name. And as someone with the last name Zacharyson, I feel their pain. And like I want to get it right. Like I feel your pain, Devon. So Devon Achane, evidently, according to Adam Schefter, that's what he threw out there this week. But man, he had a big week 3. And I was someone who was worried about the size at first. And then again, putting on my real football hat, I saw the landing spot, and I think it's okay to understand that connection and say he's going to destroy in this Miami offense and in this scheme, as we've seen in Elijah Mitchell, a Raheem Mostert, who for some reason I think people think Raheem Mostert is like this big dude. The dude's like 200 pounds. I mean, he's not that big of a guy. He's very fast, and that's exactly what we got with Devon Achane. But Achane's better than those guys, right? He's a better prospect than those players. So where are you at? Where were you at in the draft process? I think you were into him during the draft process and all that. But where are you at right now? And just what are your thoughts overall with Devon Achane? Is he a buy? Is he a sell? Do you think that he's going to maintain this? What kind of workload will he see? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying. Going into the draft, he was fluctuated between RB2 and RB4 for me the entire process. He was a player that I've got a very popular YouTube short out there where I said he will be the player that puts everyone's process and model to the test because the production's going to be there. The speed is there. You can see the athleticism, what he can bring to the table, yet he's 5'8". And let me just tell you, whatever they're listed at when they do their weight in the summertime, that ain't what they play at. You play at a much lower weight when you're on the field. So 188, he's probably playing about 182, 185. So, is lower than 188 pounds. I'm buying into him because of the offense, the scheme. How do you stop it? And this was happening without Jalen Waddle on the other side of the field. Right. So it's the creativity of the offense, JJ. They are doing things schematically that make it very, very easy for the running backs, for the linemen to create advantageous running situations. When you've got a Tyreek Hill on one side that commands double 2 eyes every single play, 2 or 3. Like these running lanes will be plentiful for the backfield moving forward. Now, do I expect him to go out there and have 200 rushing yards with 2 receiving touchdowns and 2 No. I mean, he's one of 6 players to do that 50-point game in the last 10 years. So no, I don't anticipate that. But chunk plays, the upside, there may be a handful of players. If we really looked at each situation, JJ, there's probably a handful of players that have that type of upside in fantasy, period, across all positions. And he just did that with his first real opportunity in the league. Now, Denver probably laid down and waved the white flag a little bit, but I'm not going there. What he did, what he put on wax, what he put on the film, heck yeah, I'm buying into this. He's a very good player in a great offense with an offensive mind that is next level right now. What Mike McDaniel is doing is next level type coaching and scheming. I'm buying in. He has upside that I think very few running backs possess in fantasy football.
You mentioned earlier about the death of the bell cow, right? And I think that's really, really important when analyzing Achane. It's still weird to say Achane, man. I think it's really, really important when it comes to him, though, because I've been getting questions all week for the mailbag, all that good stuff, about him, what to do with him, about that Miami backfield. And to me, and this was written in my draft guide too, he's a player who doesn't need 20 plus touches to be effective in fantasy football, right? And I think to your point about the death of the bell cow, and you look across the league, every backfield has a committee of some sort, right? Even San Francisco to some degree, right? When they're in these crazy good scripts, which they're going to often be in, they're using Elijah Mitchell more. Even Tony Pollard, we saw Rico Dowdle get more work this past week, and I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see him get some work in that offense moving forward. And so when you give that context, yeah, Devon Achane is going to be in a committee moving forward. Yeah, Raheem Mostert is still going to get his. Jeff Wilson, when he gets back, still might get his. But my stance on it is if there's going to be a staple in that backfield, it's going to be Achane. It's not going to be even Raheem Mostert, who's looked great to start the year. It's not going to be Jeff Wilson. I'm going to invest and bet on Achane, who is a better player than both of those guys. He's objectively, across the board, a more explosive and a better player. And so I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to push my chips in on that player, not the 31-year-old who's often injured and the guy coming off IR. The guy who has really only thrived within this zone scheme, right? And so that's why I think, a lot of people are like, oh, I guess we got to sell high on Devon Achane right now because he had this 50-point performance. And I'm like, yeah, look, if someone's going to buy him as a top 3 running back in fantasy, sure, go ahead and sell away. But no one does that. That's just not the way that people operate. I think at times we assume that fantasy managers are sort of dumber and more irrational than they actually are. And I think a lot of people realize that last week was an outlier. Achane's probably never going to do that again in his career in terms of scoring 50 plus fantasy points. But can he be a solid RB2 for your team? Yeah, I definitely think he can. So I'm with you with him. Plus, look, there is such a difference between the best offenses and the worst offenses in the league right now compared to what we even saw 5-6 years ago. I want as many Miami Dolphins as possible, right? Like I want that offense. I want those players. 10 touches in the Miami Dolphins offense could hypothetically be better than 25 touches in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
Yes.
And so I think that needs to be considered as well.
100%. Nothing else to add. It's in Miami's offense, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're much better than like the second best offense when you're looking at EP. It's crazy. Unreal what they're doing right now. So absolutely give me every piece of that offense. And if I could only have one that wasn't Tyreek Hill, it would be Devon Achane.
Yeah.
Achane.
It's too hard, man. Too hard. Let's move on so we don't have to say it anymore. All right, so Treylon Burks. I'm trying to talk about the younger guys here because I know that this is what you're into with your specialty with analyzing these players. Treylon Burks stuck in Tennessee right now. That offense, honestly, one of the lower key, most disastrous offenses in the league right now. I feel like it's not being talked about enough how bad that offense has really been to start the year. Even DeAndre Hopkins has not been that good of a fantasy asset whatsoever. And so you get Treylon Burks. He's now buried behind not only DeAndre Hopkins, but he's in this offense. It's just looking rough this year. So where do you view him? I don't think this year is necessary to really dig into, but are you then nervous about him moving forward in Dynasty too?
Yeah, this year it's a no-go. I was enthusiastic about what he could potentially do this year. Coming into the season, JJ, as the potential number one, and they bring in Hopkins, and I'm like, okay, this is even better. Now he doesn't have to be the one. He could slot into that number 2 role, learn from Hopkins, and this offense could get rolling. But it's anything but that. Seasonal leagues, he's unstartable. You look at the target share on that team. They're not even good. They're not quality targets.
Right.
He's not being targeted at the clip he needs to be in order to be a consistent producer. And long term, it's the second year, JJ. And while I talked about at the beginning of the show, I understand that player career arcs don't just go all the way up all the time like an elevator or stairs, and they don't just plummet down like off of a cliff. But by year 2, especially with wide receivers, I need to see something out of you in year 2. And while there were flashes as a rookie, I wonder how much this is harming him, because it doesn't look like Vrabel's probably going anywhere. Much like those middling teams in Dynasty, you never want to be in the middle. It feels like Tennessee is this middling team where they're not going to be picking high enough to draft an elite quarterback. And this is bad. It is not a good situation. And it's funny, we just go from Miami, where you say you want a part of any part of that offense, and I mean any. In deeper leagues, give me some Braxton Berrios in best ball as well. JJ, I honestly, outside of some name that the game isn't matching up with the name, I don't think I want any part of Tennessee's offense now or for the foreseeable future. It looks bad.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the problem too with Treylon is, in college, he played a lot in the slot, right? He was very much an inline player, and they've been trying to not do that in the NFL, but that's part of the optimism I had from like a real football perspective with DeAndre Hopkins being there. They just don't have a play. I don't think they're using Burks necessarily properly. And then on top of that, I don't think they have a distributor to be able to get him the ball. So I'm with you. I think in a lot of 12-team leagues, unfortunately, like he's droppable, right? Like I think that's where we're at right now with Treylon Burks.
Yeah, and if you're just holding them, it almost, those are players where I call them just landmines. They're sort of grenades that when you cut a player like a Treylon Burks, or you cut a player, some other middling player that has a name, what happens is when those players hit waivers, your league mates in turn use some of their fab or their waiver priority to pick up Treylon. That's a landmine that I'm planting out there on waivers for somebody else to drop. To drop a player that may not have the name, JJ, a Robert Woods, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm dropping Robert Woods. Let me pick up Treylon. He's got upside. But no, that's a landmine. That's a grenade that you've actively planted out there for another league mate to pick up, drop somebody else, free up a roster spot for you, and burn some fab for somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think, and I talked about this a little bit on my mailbag show, but I don't even think that if DeAndre Hopkins were to get hurt and Treylon were to be elevated, I still don't even know if he would be a consistent enough. You would roster him probably at that point, but I don't know if he would be this like plug in your lineup and forget about it kind of guy. I don't think it would be there just because the offense has just been so inept.
And JJ, in seasonal leagues, that's a big thing. If you pick up a player and you literally have no idea of when to start said player, and you're just kind of, what is the use of said player if you truly don't even feel confident of plugging him in to your lineup when the opportunity? If DeAndre Hopkins goes out and you still don't feel good about starting Treylon, then he needs to be on waivers.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Unless you're in a super deep format or something.
Yes.
Then, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, it's just a really, really tough offense, to just generally invest in right now. One of the things with late round perspectives I like to do is obviously get another analyst perspective. I say stuff on this show, throughout the week, and a lot of the stuff that I say is going to be naturally wrong, and some of the stuff I say is going to be naturally stupid because I don't get everything right, and I'm going to look idiotic at the end of the day. One of the players that I had on 15 transactions this week as a sell was Dameon Pierce, and I understand the other side of the argument, the favorable side of the argument, and I obviously just talked about how I don't think all fantasy managers are totally irrational, and I'm basically saying, look at Dameon Pierce last week. He found the end zone. Maybe they're looking at his total and they're saying, oh, it was a decent enough day for Pierce. An RB2 performance. I'm gonna buy into that and just kind of go from there. My argument is we actually saw a really nice game script for him, and they're still throwing in Devin Singletary, even to close out that game. And so yeah, there's gonna be games where maybe even this weekend against Pittsburgh where it's closer. They're gonna use Dameon Pierce a little bit more. The offensive line should get a little bit better. I get all of that. My concern overall is just he's not seeing the receiving usage that we would want him to see, right? So let me know how dumb I was with that recommendation.
I don't think you're dumb at all. And the optimist in me wants to say, oh man, just give it some time. It's going to work itself out. But if you watch those games, or if you just look at the numbers, you don't even have to watch it. Just look at the number. They're not going to pull Devin Singletary off of the field. This is not going to be Dameon Pierce's backfield, which I believe a lot of us fantasy gamers, to a degree, I don't believe any of us thought that he's getting 80% of the work, JJ, but 60+% consistently. The guy on passing down work consistently, Singletary filling in here and there. That's what I expected, but that's not the case. He is a part of that offense. And the bigger thing is, his rookie quarterback, they're letting him throw the ball 40+ times a game if he wants to.
Right.
And it's not going to him. So this is a situation where I definitely think that Pierce will have, and I think you agree, he'll have some moments where he pops and he's a nice RB2, maybe even some RB1 weeks here and there. But he's another guy that you plug him in and you just got your fingers crossed. You're praying for a touchdown. You do not have great confidence when you throw him in here that I've got 15 points locked in from Dameon Pierce. You're like, just don't give me 0. Please score a touchdown. He is one of the names that I think people can buy into. And if you were to trade him in a seasonal format, I think you can get something probably pretty decent and usable back. This offense is problematic for him because he's not the guy. He's got a young rookie quarterback who I don't think the Texans coaching staff cares if they win a game or not. This season is about developing C.J. Stroud and seeing what we can have in the future. It's a 4th-round running back on year 2. He is not going to have the outcome that I thought, probably. The way it looks early, he's not going to be the type of finisher that I thought he would be from a fantasy perspective this year.
New coaching staff too, right? New coaching staff. I think a lot of times, and this is me just kind of like, I don't think that I've really thrown this like idea out there, but I think a lot of times fantasy managers make the assumption that when there's something new that's going well early, like I would say overall, CJ Stroud is playing way better than even his mom thought he would play, how he would play, right? And so everyone's excited about CJ Stroud. I think the Texans are outperforming expectation, generally speaking, especially after last week. And so I think automatically it makes people think this is only going to get better, right, for Houston. Like there's no way that it gets worse. This is his first 3 games of the year, and he's already doing this. And while I understand that's part of the range of outcomes, of course, like their line's going to get healthier. Stroud looks legit, right, so far. And the coaching staff, I think, is a smart coaching staff. And so you put all that together, yeah, that's part of the range of outcomes here. But you have to also think about the flip side. Teams are now getting film. Teams are understanding how this offense is really operating when it was a big unknown entering the season. And so I do think there's at least a piece of that needs to be part of our consideration here with the Texans offense. When I say sell Dameon Pierce, I'm not saying that I think he's going to be an RB4 rest of season. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that if you can get, like draft day pricing for Dameon Pierce, because like you said, where he was being drafted to where he's at now, there's a gap where he's fallen, right? And if you can make up that gap after, and people are buying into this Texans offense, buying into the fact that he scored a touchdown this past week, why not try and do that? That's really what the Dameon Pierce take, I think, is mostly about. I'm with you on that one. All right, so let's move on to the Vikings backfield. I already talked about Alexander Mattison a little bit. This one's a disaster. It's a disaster. The Vikings right now have 9 passing touchdowns and 0 rushing touchdowns. So that's likely going to regress a little bit. And hypothetically, Alexander Mattison's numbers should look better than they do from like a fantasy perspective and a production standpoint. Seeing a lot of volume, they go out and they give up literally, I mean, it was nothing for Cam Akers. It was literally like the equivalent of like $14, right? And so they go out, they get Cam Akers, Ty Chandler's on that roster. But do you think Cam Akers in particular, like, are you buying into Cam Akers kind of overtaking this backfield and just becoming the Alexander Mattison in the backfield? Or are you concerned, sort of given how everything went down in LA? Because I know you were a Cam Akers guy, yeah? Him coming out?
Yes.
I was also a Cam Akers guy. And so I'm curious where you stand after the turmoil and the issues that he went through over in LA.
I still think Cam Akers is a supremely talented running back. I don't believe his Achilles injury that he suffered, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't think that is impacting his play on the field. I do believe that there are probably things that we do not know, we don't have the access to, that were going on back there that have contributed to the rift and the friction in that relationship. I think a change of scenery will be very good for Cam Akers. But I also, JJ, NFL coaches are arrogant. They are arrogant, right? They want their guys that they pick, that they've been around, to be successful. Do I think Cam Akers is a threat to Alexander Mattison? I wish the answer was yes, because if the answer was yes and there was some true conviction behind that, you and I say absolutely, he's a threat, you want to go get him, it would make all of this a lot easier. It's go get Cam Akers, try to get off of Mattison, it's only a matter of time. I think the more likely outcome is both of them are just kind of muddied in that bad backfield. Mm-hmm. I believe that unless Mattison gets hurt, they're not going to bench him. He's been there for how many years? His entire career.
Yeah.
This is O'Connell's guy. He's been there his entire career. Absent him just absolutely getting hurt or just fumbling, can't catch anything, I don't think he's going to be relegated to the bench and Cam Akers elevated to 60+% opportunity. It's probably just going to be a nasty backfield with both of those guys and create an environment where for fantasy, we don't know who to play on any given week. I don't think that Mattison's play has forced the Vikings to say, we don't want to see what somebody else can give us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Akers is going to get the opportunity to get enough work to take that backfield over from him and the 3, 4, 5 attempts or opportunities that Ty Chandler gets. And again, I know that's not a lot, but when it's between, 10 touches and 8 touches, 11 and 13, those things matter. So this just feels like a situation, JJ, where it's just going to be a coin flip headache thing for the Vikings.
Do you think there's a chance that Ty Chandler is the most talented back right now in that backfield?
Chance, I do believe that. I like Ty Chandler coming out of North Carolina quite a bit. Yeah. I was a big Ty Chandler guy. I think so, but even they haven't been giving him the opportunity, right? So it's, even if he is he going to get the opportunity? But I do think there is a non-zero chance that Ty Chandler is the running back who should be toting the rock in Minnesota and not the other two. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing too, I don't know if Chandler is like a true bell cow, in the league. I think he's more like maybe because one of his comps for me was Elijah Mitchell coming out, right? And so like I don't think that Elijah Mitchell was ever going to maintain that rookie season workload. It just doesn't, like we saw him break down too, right? And so that's why I'm hesitant to say that Chandler would be like a true bell cow. But I do think that, again, we're shifting our thinking in fantasy football right now towards efficiency a lot more than volume in general because all these backfields are so muddied. And so do I think he could be the most efficient back in that backfield? I would probably bet on that, honestly, like of those three. But I don't know if the volume would necessarily be there. So I'm with you overall. Let's talk about some rookies, though. I have a question that I think is really, really interesting. There's 2 wide receivers. Quentin Johnston came out in the first round. And then you have Marvin Mims, who gets drafted in the late second. Sean Payton's first pick. Everyone's making a big deal out of that. And meanwhile, Sean Payton seems to not like him because he's giving him 11 routes a game. And despite the fact that he's leading the league and with like a 7.5 yards per route run. So I have a question for you though. Right now you have the Mike Williams injury, which means Josh Palmer obviously going to stay. Now he's going to get elevated to 2 wide sets. They run a lot of 11 personnel though. So Quentin Johnston now going to be elevated and seeing a lot more work in that offense just naturally. And then on the flip side, you have Marvin Mims, who's also playing in an offense with 2 other decent wide receivers but he's not getting the work, but he's flashed, right? He's shown us what he's capable of. So my question to you, who would you rather have more moving forward? Marvin Mims or Quentin Johnston?
Oh man, Marvin Mims, you're pulling at my heartstrings, and I feel like this was kind of a dirty question because my history with TCU wide receivers, I don't know if you know, hasn't been great, JJ. So you're baiting me to say Quentin Johnston's name, and I don't want to do it, but I do think that fantasy gamers are sleeping a little bit on this situation and Quentin Johnston in particular. And I get it. He did not start off the preseason looking good. Hell, he hadn't played much for the Chargers this year, and he hasn't done much with the opportunities that he was given. But Mike Williams is out for the season. He's out. He is out for the season. And while I understand picking up Josh Palmer and spending money on him for your waiver claims this week, Quentin Johnston was still a first-round pick.
Right.
This is a player who's 6'3", 210 pounds, that can run down the field. In training camp, when we saw him thriving, it was those downfield targets, which have now been vacated, a lot of those vacated by Mike Williams. The fact that Keenan Allen is getting as many air yards as he's getting this year is really the surprise. And I don't know if they want to particularly use him in that role week in and week out. QJ is going to get the opportunity. He's going to get a chance. And for fantasy, like you said, gamers are smarting up now. We are wising up to efficiency is really what you're trying to chase. You want to chase that efficiency. However, we are still looking for players, JJ, who have an opportunity to score us those fantasy points, right? I need somebody that's going to get the opportunity. And for whatever reason, I think Sean Payton must be saving Marvin Mims for like when he overhauls the team next year. He doesn't want to subject them to Russell Wilson and company. He doesn't want to do that. So he's not playing them. QJ is going to be on the field. And I think what will happen is I've seen in some leagues, Quentin Johnston dropped in redraft league, just dropped. I don't want anything to do with him because we're so used to, and we want to expect these rookies to come in from day one and be Jamar Chase, and that is the outlier. So moving forward, if I had to say today, right now, you're putting my feet to fire, I'd be slightly more interested in Quentin Johnston based on that situation. Offensively, they've got a top 3 quarterback in the NFL in Justin Herbert. Their defense isn't playing good, which should yield some game script in which Quentin Johnston in the passing game will need to be used. We don't know when Austin Eckler's coming back. I hope he's back this weekend, but if he's not, Josh Kelly nor Isaiah Spiller have done a good job filling in that role.
Yeah.
They're going to have to throw the ball.
Yeah.
QJ, go get it done, dude. JJ, I can't data this anymore. Go get it done. You're a first-round pick. You're playing with Justin Herbert. The starting wide receiver's out. You were drafted to replace this guy at some point. Go make it happen. Please, Quentin Johnston, please.
And I think the answer, too, is that you want both of these guys rostered right now, right? Like,
yes.
you want Marvin Mims rostered. I know that the path to relevancy doesn't seem as clear for him, but you just want good players rostered on your teams. The thing with QJ that I find really fascinating is he was just, I wrote this up in my prospect guide too. The dude was just such a volatile prospect. Like, you could see the ceiling. You could see like his top comp in my model was T. Higgins. His next comp was Brashad Perriman. Like that is the spectrum that we're looking at right now with Quentin Johnston. And the other thing too, I'm not that big of a, like I got Josh Palmer in a couple of leagues because I wanted that immediate production, and they were kind of deeper where you got a lot of flex spots that you can throw wide receivers in there and stuff. So I went after him in a couple of leagues, but I don't think that Josh Palmer is a special player. Like I don't think that he's someone that we have to be overly concerned about, like that Quentin Johnston can't beat out. Like if QJ has the talent and he shows off in the next 3 or 4 weeks, all of a sudden in 2 wide receiver sets, we're seeing QJ opposite of Keenan Allen, instead of Josh Palmer. So I think that that's part of his range of outcomes too. So I would probably agree at this point, the more that I'm looking at this and thinking about this, that at least from an upside standpoint, like a true upside standpoint, because if you think about what, like if both of these guys hit, clearly you want the guy that's getting the ball from Justin Herbert, right? And
absolutely.
And clearly I think that Cortland Sutton is a bigger threat to Marvin Mims or even a Judy than Josh Palmer is, right? So that's the other piece to that too. So I think that was a good. I know it was a tough question, but I think you came through unscathed. That was good.
I think you baited me a little bit to put my neck out there to say another TCU wide receiver, but here we are, JJ. Let's go, QJ. Come on, baby.
Let's do it. All right. So which player, could be rookie or non-rookie, that's gotten off to a slow start, do you think that people are sleeping on right now?
Can I cheat and say the player that has gotten off to no start at all?
Yeah.
And we need to be, and I've got him ranked as RB14 this week, and I feel like I want to put him higher, but Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints. This is one. I was on the Underdog show with Josh Norris before the season started and talking about 5 players that I couldn't stop drafting. It was Alvin Kamara. Once the suspension was issued down where he was only going to miss 3 games, so okay. They've got Jamal Williams. They'll ride him for a couple of weeks, and then when Kamara's back, it's going. Well, that didn't turn out to be the case, and then a lot of people thought about Kendre Miller and the excitement for Kendre Miller, which, JJ, if we really think about that situation, we're talking about a rookie running back who didn't test through the process, didn't do anything to OTAs in minicamp because of the MCL injury, was hurt during barely played from his final game at TCU. So to think that he was going to come in and steal Alvin Kamara's work, not going to happen. Saints are probably not going to have Kamara on the roster next year. And you watch this team, and offensively, they lack speed. It's Chris Olave and pretty much nothing else. They don't have a lot of speed. Their starting quarterback is hurt. They've got to bring in a backup. It is about to be Alvin Kamara Volume City. I truly believe that if I were the Saints, knowing that contractually we're probably not going to have this guy on the roster next year, we've got a good enough team to win that division. And it's a tougher division than I think a lot of people thought going into the season. But it's not happening without number 41.
Yeah.
When he gets back on the field, I don't care how much Tony Jones has been playing, how excited you were for Kendre Miller, they're about to load him up for as much work as he can handle. And on an offense with a strong defense, I think this should set Alvin Kamara up for some very positive game scripts, some advantageous opportunities for him to score us some fantasy points. So if you can get him into a deal before it happens, if by some crazy happenstance he's on waivers or the other team doesn't need him or that team is decimated, that'd be somebody I'd be willing to buy into. And quite frankly, the fact that he's missed the first 3 games doesn't really bother me much of anything. JJ, he's fresh. He should be ready to go. I need him for how many more weeks do we have? 12 more weeks of fantasy? That's what I need from Alvin Kamara. 11 more weeks of him doing what he needs to do. So that's a player who hasn't done anything, but we need not sleep on the talent, the skill set. And I get it, right? People say, well, the past 2 years, he wasn't really efficient. Well, he was playing a role that he had no business playing. Mm-hmm. When Alvin Kamara was thriving, he was in that complementary role with an early down banger and getting him opportunities in space. Let Kendre and Tony Jones bang it up the A-gap 15, 18 times a game. Use Kamara in space. He will be featured on the goal line. There's a lot of opportunity in this New Orleans offense, and I'm really excited for Kamara coming back.
Yeah, Jamal Williams on IR now too, and there was obviously still a chance that they would have used him in a goal line role of some sort. The thing with Miller too, he wasn't that. He was at least a raw pass catcher entering the league, Kendre. He didn't have that amazing of a profile there. And the other thing with him is that I like the potential and I like the upside and I like throwing darts at those kinds of players just in general across any sort of format. But he's young. I mean, he's still only 21. I mean, or at least he was 21 at the NFL draft. And so, that's another piece to this puzzle where it's really easy. And I look, last week, I thought that he was going to get more work than he ended up getting versus Tony Jones, because I don't think Tony Jones is this special of a player. But then I think back and I take a step back and I'm like, you know what? Kind of makes sense. They're not just going to throw this 21-year-old, 22-year-old, again, however old he is, behind there and just let him run the ball 15 plus times. I think that he could grow into a role in that offense as the early down banger, as you mentioned, and kind of be that guy. But that's sort of the perfect complement to a guy like Kamara right now.
Yes. That's, and it's not even an indictment on that way of thinking, JJ, because yes, if you put Tony Jones, hell, Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller just right next to each other, I think Kendre's the more talented player.
Exactly.
But he's a rookie, and it's the NFL, and there's going to be that veteran preference, and let's get the guy. Tony Jones, for whatever he's not, as a prospect, he's played NFL football, and he understands what to do. And I think that's one of the things that we in fantasy, we kind of overlook those situations sometimes, and then we take a step back and be like, okay, well, it does make some sense. And it's tough to get right. Revisionist history is always 2020. Your vision is always 2020 when you look back. But one of the things that I challenge gamers to do is pay attention to what the teams are telling you now. I think there's so much information going on that's happening right in front of our faces, JJ, and we willfully close our eyes to it because we don't like Brock Purdy. I think Treylon Burks is good. Well, Kendre Miller was an awesome prospect, but then the team is telling us, nah, man, this is what we plan to do, and we just ignore it.
Yeah, and I think with rookies, because I'm someone who really invests in young players and redraft, because I think the market just doesn't totally understand that side of things. But what I found, and what I've really found through starting late round fantasy football and having a more one-on-one connection with listeners and stuff like that and talking to them on a daily basis, is people do not have that much patience when it comes to these players. And so when week 8, week 9 hit, and I still have Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? And he now all of a sudden is the wide receiver 2 on that team because Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf got hurt or something, then I'm feeling good that I was patient and was able to stick with those players. But I do think there's this weird sort of dichotomy within the fantasy space in the way that managers manage these rookies, where they assume or they think that these guys should just be getting work right away. And when they don't get work right away, that it's bad news. Kendre Miller, maybe Kendre Miller is a bad example, but like there are a lot of rookie backs, rookie players who down the stretch will be not necessarily league winners, but very, very productive. I don't know if it's going to be Miller or not, but you got to stay patient with those guys. But staying patient with those guys means understanding that early in the season, you're going to run into these situations where Tony Jones plays ahead of Kendre Miller. Tony Jones gets more work than Kendre Miller. And it's really hard in the moment to sit back and be like, I don't believe that, because talent profile wise, it's very easy to say, yeah, Kendre Miller's better than Tony Jones. Of course he's better than Tony Jones. But at the end of the day, man, like if you're patient and you understand that that's the way that teams operate, even Devon Achane, right? Week 2, we could have seen more from him realistically, they didn't give him a lot of work until Savon Ahmed was out, right? And so it's just this game of patience with rookies. And I think what I'm saying is I'm buying into Alvin Kamara more now that I'm talking through that, with a guy like Kendre Miller. I think that's a really good call out with Kamara. Last question for you. What do you think? This is more higher level, more game theory, all that good stuff. What do you think fantasy managers get wrong the most when they're managing their teams in season? I know I just mentioned giving up and not being patient enough, giving up on rookies and stuff like that. Maybe that's your answer, but what do you think that fantasy managers screw up the most as they're managing their teams?
Well, part of it was going to be some patience, having some patience for those players. If you drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba early in a startup in redraft, then even though he has not started strong, or at least the level of expectation that we had, like, you knew you drafted a rookie wide receiver. So I think the lack of patience that we're seeing in this very reactionary game will cost some managers this year.
Yeah.
Because there will be leagues, JJ, and you'll get stuff in your mailbag. People will DM, tweet you, and be like, JJ, I dropped JSN after week 5 and he's on waivers and I've got the last 40% of my budget. Should I just unload it there? And we see this year after year of not being patient, just giving up. Right? I mean, people are with Jahmyr Gibbs right now. Watch what happens tonight, JJ. Montgomery's supposed to play. If Gibbs doesn't, it's so funny. We complained and cried weeks 1 and week 2. Give him more touches. Then he gets 17, slams up the middle. Yeah. Oh man, I don't like that. He's no good. Right. It's this reactionary non-patience that we have, which turns to the bigger point of don't try to chase the past production. Mm-hmm. Don't chase the 50-pointer for A-Chain. Mm-hmm. Listen to this episode. Run it back if you need to and understand the situation is fruitful. Even if in next week, JJ, if he finishes RB 55 next week, it will not change my outlook on him moving forward because I understand the bigger picture. I'm not chasing the 50-point performance because it's not going to happen again, probably. It probably won't. I'm chasing the situation, the opportunity, the upside, the process. It's one of the simplest things that we've talked about. It is truly process over the result. I can live with because we have no impact on the result, none. We have there's nothing, but you can have a sound process in which you follow and then you live with the result. And for me, I'm okay with that in fantasy. If I make a bad start-sit decision, if I make a bad call, but I know the process was solid and we're trusting the data, we're using some context around what we're actually seeing or reading, and it doesn't work out, I think most people that consume our content, that are subscribers to our work, they're okay with that. What I'm not okay with is just the gut feel, reactionary, they're not producing in week 2, cut, drop, no good. Because what you end up putting your team and yourself into is a position where you'll have to go overpay for something that probably won't happen, or you miss out on those fruitful opportunities to plug a JSN into your lineup. Or when Kendre Miller is more involved in the offense alongside Kamara, you still have him rostered. And JJ, we talked about patience. As good as Bijan Robinson has been so far this season, I bet you one thing. I bet you by week 12, week 13, those Tyler Algier touches, maybe they shrink a little bit more. Yeah. Bijan's increases, and he's even better down the line. So we talk Kendre, we're talking A-Chain, Gibbs, but even a player like Bijan Robinson, I don't believe we've even sniffed what his ceiling could be because he is still splitting some work with a veteran running back, and we ain't gonna get into Ritter and the passing attack. But the theory and sort of the strategy around this is exhibit a level of patience because if the player is good, I will bet on the fact that when we get later into the season, things get colder, people are banged up, that those players, that cream will inevitably rise to the top.
Yeah, I mean, you're really saying also buy into talent, right? Like buy into, look at your talent evaluation. This is something that I've definitely learned. I mean, if you look like a decade ago at fantasy content, 95% of the content was only situation-based. It was not, people were not talking about the players themselves, how they create their opportunity. It was always, this guy's in a good offense, they're going to score points this week. This defense has given up X number of fantasy points to wide receivers. So yeah, just play this wide receiver based strictly on situation. But what I've learned through the years, first and foremost, more than anything, is that if you have that process like you're talking about, how you're prospecting guys, what have you, and look, obviously people listening to this are not doing what we're doing, right? They're not sitting there watching film or putting grades together or doing any of that kind of stuff. They don't have a prospect model. I'm not saying that. I'm saying look at other analysts and have a backbone based on what they're doing and find people that you trust and use that as your process. And I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they said, I love having your prospect guide to just quickly reference players for when they start to make some noise in the league, and I can say, oh, did JJ's model like this guy or not? And then you can, like Ronnie Rivers, right? If Ronnie Rivers gets some opportunity in that Rams backfield, people that follow my work probably aren't going to be that aggressive off the waiver wire and getting Ronnie Rivers because he had an 11th percentile prospect score. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff is really, really important, is to not give up on these players too early, especially when they're potential generational or, some of the best players that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, like a JSN, someone like that, obviously a Bijan, especially don't let, and look, Tyler Algier is a good player. He's not even a bad running back, right? But he's not Bijan Robinson. And so eventually, especially if Atlanta's competitive, eventually that's going to start to flip a little bit more, as we see every single year with all of these guys. Ray, this is amazing. I'm so glad we got to finally do a show together, man.
Me too, man. Me too. This was awesome. It
was great. Why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on X, since we're calling everybody's correct names, on X at RayGQ. You can go to DestinationDevy.com, Destination Devy YouTube. We're Wake Up with Ray G show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We just have a good time. Try to bring some fun to the game. I want to entertain. I want to provide some actionable information, but more importantly, I want people to have a good time when they tap into the content on Destination Devy. JJ, you have been somebody that, man, I went back and listened to my very first podcast that I did back in 2018 when I started DD. You were the inspiration for my first podcast. So
really,
you've got after every segment, you've got the little thing that the little sounder that plays to get you. So I did like airplane dings. Like it was like ding dong. The first, and I was trying to do my show like JJ. I swear to you, dude. I talked about this on an episode, but
so good.
I say that to say that to finally be able, and I had to switch it. I couldn't do it like, I had to be me. I could not do it like you. It didn't work for very long. But to be on your platform, to watch everything that you're doing in this space, man, I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate your content, your work, your demeanor, how you carry yourself and your business on this platform, man. This was fun for me. I literally canceled some work meetings to be here with you because it was that important to me to be on the show. So thank you for having me on your platform.
Man, I appreciate you, and right back at you. I mean, you're crushing it. You guys are doing awesome work with Wake Up. I love tuning in whenever I can. It's just been great. It's been great, getting to chat with you, at least offline, for so many years now. So I'm really glad that we got to do the show. As always, everyone, you can find me on X at Late Round QB. You can find everything I'm offering over on lateround.com. And as always, thanks for tuning in.